As we begin our class this morning, we're going to continue on a class on hermeneutics, and this will be a lot better class than the last one, I promise. And so if you're new or you're visiting, last week was on syntax and semantics, which is a form of grammar. We did grammar the week before. And so, but I promise this is going to be more palatable and I think more interesting to you. And the reason we're doing this is trying to understand how we can become better students of the Bible, how we can have a better understanding of whenever we turn to a biblical text, whatever text that might be, how can we have the best understanding of what the original context is and what the original meaning was so that we can faithfully understand it and then reapply it for our own purposes in the 21st century in our lives, right? The Bible has eternal truths. It's given to us for our instruction, our correction, our reproof, our training in righteousness, 2 Timothy 3, 16 and 17, Romans 15, verse 4. But we need to be good and faithful stewards and rightly divide it, right? 2 Timothy 2:15. And so how do we do that? Well, one of the things that we do is we go through those things we talked about before by considering the context, considering the grammar, the syntax, the semantics of the actual text itself. But one of the ways that we do that, and one of the ways that I'm really interested in, is through historical, cultural backgrounds. And so trying to understand something about the history and what is taking place in that time frame to kind of help us get a better understanding of what is going on. If we found a letter and it was from a German soldier to his wife, well, I don't even know if this is the Franco-Prussian War in the 1870s. I don't even know if it's World War I in 1917 or if it's World War II in 1943, right? I mean, that's not that big of a time frame. It's 75 years, but those are vastly different circumstances and vastly different things that are going on in the world at that time, right? And so I didn't even know, what am I talking about, right? Because if I just say, this is a letter from a German soldier to his wife, well, you probably already have preconceived notions of what it is. Because culturally, what do we think about? I automatically think about World War II. It could have been the German army that was fighting against Napoleon in 18 teens, right? I mean, so you have to understand what is taking place historically and culturally to help you have a better understanding of what is being talked about in that text. And the same is true for the Bible. And so what are some areas in which we can look at trying to have a good understanding of this? And so background knowledge will turn a study into a three-dimensional event. So what are some things that we can look at? So history and culture. And so history is events and times. What are the things that are happening and what timeline are we looking at? And culture is the manners, the customs, the institutions, the principles that characterize and form the environment in which people live. One of the ways, the primary way actually, that we figure out about historical events and timelines and how we understand ancient cultures is through archaeology. And so every year we kind of do the top 10 archaeological finds that correspond to the Bible land or Bible text. And so I think those are very informative. But archaeology is our primary source for understanding history and the culture of the past. And it is amazing the amount of information that we do have. When you think about, things that we have that are thousands of years old, the British Library has, I don't know if it's 10,000, but it is thousands upon thousands of clay tablets from the Assyrians and Babylonians that have never been read or translated. Like somewhere around like 10,000 texts going back 3,000 years that we've just because there's no time. I mean, there's not enough scholars who can read cuneiform that can go through these thousands of tablets, right? And so, one of the misconceptions is that we have just a ton of stuff from the ancient world, and we do have a ton of stuff. But if you look at that as a percentage, it's pretty small of all the things that have ever happened in place. But there's been research, or someone put this number out there, some scholar, and he's got a breakdown. But he says of all the things that we have from antiquity, the things that have been really studied in depthly and published articles on is 0.006%. Is that insane? So if you want to learn cuneiform, and become a scholar in ancient Assyrian, there is a job for you in London at the British Museum. And now with scans, you don't have to go. You can just read it at home and translate it, scan it, and send it back. So, anybody? Twilight careers, anybody? No? Anyways. And so, but it is pretty interesting. And so it's pretty amazing when you think about, just how much stuff that is left to be discovered. I mean, over in the Middle East, or Turkey especially, there's mounds where we know there's an ancient Greek city right there under that hill. That's why there's a hill right there on that flat place. There's the ruins of an ancient city right there. And for me, I'm like, well, let's dig it up. It's like there's no time or money. There's no time, money, resources, or people, right? And so it's just amazing just how much stuff is over there that we still have yet to explore. But the things that we do have give us a really good example, and thankfully for us, because of Christianity and the desire to know more about the Bible lands and the civilizations that correspond to the Bible are the most studied in the ancient world. And so that's probably because of the documents that we have preserved for us. And a lot of that has to come with Christian scholars throughout the ages preserving things from the Romans, the Greeks, and obviously Jewish culture and timelines as well. And so pretty interesting. And so whenever we think about looking at the historical context, and so let's just talk about our class that we're doing right now on the life of David, going through 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, and 1 Chronicles. Okay, as we think about the backgrounds to have a better understanding of what is going on in that story, I want to study that story. I want to understand what is going on. Well, there's some things that I need to do if I'm really going to do my best to understand exactly what is going on that I need to look at that is mentioned in the text. A lot of times in the text, you'll see different aspects about geography, where David and his men are, where Saul's men are encamped. But sometimes we just kind of read those names, just kind of keep going. Right? But if I wanted to do my best, I understand time is limited and we can't do as much as we would like to all the time. So you just kind of have to do what you can. One of those things is geography. Me and Bernie were talking about this quite a bit. When you think about where David and his men were in the En-Gedi, and you think about just how barren and desolate that place was, and you see an aerial picture of right there by the Dead Sea and those passes and those narrow mountain passes and just the nothingness that is there, it really gives you a better understanding of what David and his men are going through when they're on the run from Saul and then putting their faith and trust in God. And so, geography is something that is boring to some people. I understand that, but it can be really informative. Same thing when you think about John the Baptizer. Okay, you read the Bible and it tells us that all of Jerusalem and Judea were going out to be baptized by John in the River Jordan. Okay, cool. No, not cool, right? It is cool, but you don't know why it's cool, because you just read that verse and it's a verse in the Bible and whatever. No. Okay, so the distance from Jerusalem and Judea to where John was baptized in the Jordan is like somewhere between 12 and like 18 miles. They're going by foot. You know why they're going by foot? Because it's down a huge mountain ravine that drops like 12,000 feet in elevation. And so it could be 8,000 feet. I got to go back and check my numbers, but it's more than I've walked, right? I've never ascended or descended 8,000 feet ever in my life, ever. Okay. Not a hiker, not my thing. Okay. Some of you have. Okay. These people were going and descending 8,000 feet from Jerusalem and Judea to go hear the preaching of John, be baptized by him, and then walk back up. Okay. We can get people to get out of bed on Sunday mornings and drive 7 minutes to church. Okay. Not you. You're here. But the average person. Okay. So think about the religious awakening that it would take to get everybody, not the Wednesday night faithful, not the Sunday night faithful, everybody in Marshall County to do something like that, to go hear a preacher and get baptized. Could you imagine the religious movement, the anticipation, the idea that the Messiah was finally here that was taking place? And so you read that passage, you're like, okay, cool, whatever. It's like, you've missed it. Okay. What it's trying to show you is just how intense the messianic anticipation was, that this was the time the Christ was supposed to come. Everybody knew it, and everybody was responding. Okay? But if you know geography, you just read that text, it's just a random Bible verse, right? So it really just heightens and enlightens what is going on, right? Jonah, Jonah gets in a boat and he goes, to Tarshish, right? Then you look at a map and you think that Tarshish is probably Cadiz in modern day Spain. And you look at a map and you think that Jonah's supposed to go over here to Nineveh, and he gets in a boat going to modern day Spain, right? On the literally the end of the world, on the other side of the world, right? It's like, Jonah went the other way. Now he didn't just go the other way. He went all the way the other way. So at least was trying to. And so those geographies, they help you to understand the deeper understanding of the story. And so, so geography is important. Politics, right? Politics have been an important part of people's lives throughout history. And politics were just as important, if not more important, in the ancient world than they are today. Okay. And so people get really jazzed up, hot about politics. It's not new, right? That's the same in the ancient world as well. Why does Jesus have the Herodians come in and asking him questions? They're politicians, right? Why do the Pharisees try to catch Jesus in a political question? We pay taxes to Caesar or not? That's not a question about what is the duty of the citizen towards the state. That's a political question. That is a hot button political question, right? And so they're saying no matter how he answers, he'll make 50% of the people mad. Donald Trump's a genius. Donald Trump's an idiot. I can pick either one and make half the country mad. Either one. And so they think, we got him. We're going to corner him, and we're going to ask him his views on Trump. And no matter what happens, half the people will be upset. And we'll just pick whichever half are mad and get them all ginned up and get them to attack him. That's what we'll do. And so they go to Jesus with the modern day equivalent. Should we pay taxes to Caesar or not? The Herodians think, yeah, pay taxes to Caesar. Right? The Pharisees are like, no, don't pay taxes to Caesar. We got him. Right? What does Jesus do? He says, give me a coin. Here's a coin. Whose image is this? Caesar's. Give to Caesar's what's Caesar's and give to God what's God's. Right? Oh, no. He didn't make anybody mad. He made everybody think. Nobody's mad. And so the entire plot falls. But you have to understand, the Pharisees are asking him a political question in order to trap him. Right? So it's not a new thing to ask a person a political question. We can nail him to the wall with the way he answers. Right? Well, they did the same thing with Jesus. But if you don't understand politics, if you don't understand the position of the Herodians, and you don't understand the just deep-seated disdain that the Pharisees have for the Herodians and the Sadducees, who were kind of in bed with the Romans also, then you miss those things. The political issues between Israel and Judah are massive in the Old Testament whenever the kingdoms are divided, right? And what's going on politically between different kings? Are the kings fighting? Are the kings in a time of truce? Has there been intermarriage between the kings of Judah and the kings of Israel? Like, what's going on? What's the situation with Samaria? Because there are times in which Samaria is attacking Israel. There's also times when Samaria is in truce with Israel attacking Judah. So, like, what is going on politically in this situation? Why is it that God is so angry at the king of Judah for trying to make a treaty with Egypt or Assyria? And why does the king keep being told by the prophet of God, stop making treaties? And why does he keep doing it? So, because he's an idiot. He's not an idiot. He's a king. At the time frame, Judah is in between the two most powerful civilizations in the world. The Assyrians, later the Babylonians, and the Egyptians. Okay? If you have the country of, I don't know, Panama. It's not a good one. Okay. Let's say Switzerland. Okay. Switzerland is small. It's 1980. The Cold War is ramping up. You've got the USSR in the east, and you've got the Americans on the west, and the Swiss are selling cheese to both sides, or whatever they make in Swiss. I don't know, Swiss cheese. And the Americans go to the Swiss and say, if you sell one more block of cheese to the Russians, we'll drop 15 nukes on Switzerland, and it'll be a sinkhole for the rest of humanity existence. Like, we're done. You're like, can I have a week to think about it? Sure. Then all of a sudden, the ambassador from Moscow comes and says, I hear the Americans have threatened you with 15 nuclear bombs. We'll drop 45. There'll be a lake in the middle of Europe. Like, so make a decision. You're like, what am I going to do? And then all of a sudden, a preacher comes in and says, hey, man, you got to put your faith in God. God's going to take care of you. Just don't email him back. Be fine. God will take care of you. Yeah, God says you're going to be fine. Okay? Now all of a sudden, you know what happens? You read the Old Testament, and you're a little bit more sympathetic to a king of Judah, aren't you? He's a king, right? Now, obviously, from the eye of faith, 2,000 years in the past, what do you think? Well, he should have put his faith and trust in God. The prophet's coming to him, he's giving an ultimatum. But if you don't understand the political crux that he is in, with Assyria and Egypt chomping at the bits to attack each other, and you're the small little kingdom in the middle, right? Then you don't really have a full understanding of what it means when God says, put your faith and your trust in me, right? And then also, I think it helps us to realize that, okay, God expected Hezekiah or Jehoiachin or one of these kings to put his faith and trust in God in that type of situation. What's stopping me from trusting God with my issues at work or my issues with my family? Well, now all of a sudden, my issues seem a little bit smaller than Hezekiah's, don't they? Right? But instead of reading the Old Testament and saying, well, Hezekiah was an idiot, or Jehoiachin was an idiot, they should just trust in God. Well, okay, let's understand the political situation so we can have a better understanding of what is going on. And then we can say, yeah, he should have trusted in God. Now we can faithfully understand the context of what is going on. And then I can try to reappropriate it and apply it to my own life. So I think that's the thing, right? So you may think, well, that's just doesn't help. It does help. Think about economics, right? So like every society and culture is shaped by socioeconomics. Extremely important understanding of the concerns, struggles, the focus on the original audience. When you look at the situation in the time of the judges, right? The Bible tells you, if you read closely, the Bible will tell you about geography. Well, if everything is written for our learning and understanding, every word that's in the Bible is important. So if it gives you a random geographical feature, that's important. If it tells you the political makeup of the time, that's important. If it gives you some type of economics, if it's talking about the Midians coming in and burning the fields and taking all the produce and getting and being in a wine press, beating out wheat, those are economical issues, right? People are hungry. They have no food. They're upset, right? And so you can think about those types of economics. If you don't take into effect the socioeconomic standings, right? Why does the Bible spend so much time talking about slaves? Well, because in the first century, when the church is established, about 25% of the Roman population are slaves, right? And so, you have to understand that, when he's talking about, slaves obey your masters and work for them as if you're working for the Lord. Well, that seems kind of odd. I mean, it's not odd if a fourth of the people in the entire known world is a slave, right? And so, you learn something about socioeconomics understanding. And so economics is very important. Military and war, this is obviously a big one. War is mentioned over 300 times in the Old Testament. To me, it is so interesting. And I heard Dale Manor, he's a member of the church, been a professor of archaeology for a long time, very well respected, has done digs in Israel and other places for the last 35, 40 years. Some of you may know Dale Manor. I don't know. And so, but I heard him give a speech one time, and the question was, what is one of the things that you've learned in archaeology that has impacted your faith the most? I was like, this is good. Like, he's a member of the church. He's a world-renowned archaeologist. We've been doing it for 40 years, maybe 50 at this point. Like, this is going to be good. Like, I don't have to be an archaeologist 50 years. He can just tell me what the most important thing he's learned is. And so this is awesome. You know what he told me? He said the 10 deposits in the late Bronze Age cities in Canaan. It's like, what a boring academic answer. 50 years of archaeology, and that's what you bring to the table. The 10 deposits in the late Bronze Age cities. He said, let me tell you why. He said 10 at that time frame was only used for two things: farming instruments and weapons. And the people in the land weren't really big into farming. The land's just not that good. You can farm a little bit, but not much. And most of these individuals are Canaanites and Phoenicians. So they get a lot of their trade or they get it from the ocean. Okay. So most of the 10 deposits would have been made to be weapons. He says, these are some of the largest 10 deposits we have from the ancient world. He said, so when God told Abraham, go to a land that I will show you, and he takes Abraham to probably the most violent place on earth at the time, because they all have walled cities. They all have these massive 10 deposits. They all have these large armies, this vast cache of weapons, and they're always fighting with each other. And God sends Abraham to this land of Canaan with all these different warring cities, puts him in a tent in the middle of all of it, and says, I'll take care of you. And in fact, I'll give it to your kids and your descendants, all this stuff. What? He said, that's been the most impactful thing for me in my 40, 50 years as an archaeologist. He said, because you do not understand. He was like, unless you understand the late Bronze Age warfare that was taking place in the land of Canaan, you cannot appreciate that God tells Abraham to go to this super violent place, like modern day Middle East, and says, you don't need weapons. You don't need to build a city. Don't need walls. I'll take care of you. I'll give it all to your descendants. He was like, it'll change the way that you view Abraham and his faith. And it was, I did a really poor job of trying to explain what he explained in that 50-minute talk, but it was really impactful. It was really, really important, right? But that's understanding military and war and how that impacts the story of the Bible and faith, right? And it also helps you to understand years later it helps you to understand why the Israelites, when they came out of the land, I'm not trying to make excuses for every bad person in the Bible. It's not what I'm trying to do. But it helps you to quit being so dismissive about things in the Bible and start seeing yourself in the story. Because you look at the Israelites and they go to the land of Canaan and they send out spies. And the spies come back and say, we can't do it. And we think, what a bunch of sorry cowardice, unbelievable. For a year in Egypt, they've seen 10 plagues. They just saw the Egyptian army, which is probably the largest army, just get smoked in the Red Sea. And they go to the land of Canaan and say, we can't take it. Or you can understand something about military and war of the ancient world and to realize that the Egyptian army and the Hittite army at that time were the two most powerful armies in the world. And right in between the Hittites and the Egyptians is what? The land of Canaan. And neither one of them conquered it. Right? They said, these people have been warriors since their birth. That's what they do. That's all they do. We're slaves. We can't do it. And so when you understand what is mentioned about the land of Canaan, just how militaristic, every city Sparta, in Canaan, you understand why the 10 spies come back after watching the 10 plagues for a year, all those things, right? To see the Egyptian army get crushed in the Red Sea. And they say, yeah, we can't do this though. Right. And so it just kind of helps you to understand. And so, but also helps you to understand even more the faith of Joshua and Caleb. Right. And so, and the depths of their faith to do that. And so, I was listening to some historians, and they're not religious historians at all. In fact, they're quite the opposite. And so, but they're world-renowned historians, Oxford trained, all that hoopla. But somebody had a question for them in kind of a history podcast, and they said, what is the bloodiest space on earth? Like, what has seen more bloodshed throughout the history of humanity? Totally. One of them said Ukraine, that area over there. And so, and the other one said, I think it would have to be the Levant area, and so the Levant area is basically, Israel right there. He said, because when you think about the massive civilizations that took place and the constant warfare of the Canaanites, the oldest battle that we have in history, the oldest recorded battle that we have in the history of humanity is between the ancient Egyptians and the ancient Hittites fighting in Canaan. So this is the oldest documented battle in the history of the world, right? They fight there. The Assyrians come. The Babylonians come. Alexander comes. The Persians come. Alexander comes. Then after the Greek Empire split up, you had the Seleucids and the Ptolemies fight there. Then you had the Roman and Jewish wars, right? And so it's just for all of humanity, it's just been fighting the whole time. And so, right, but it helps you kind of understand that history. And so what about cultural practices? What about things a little bit more intimate or closer to home that kind of help us to also have a better understanding? What about family customs? If we learn about the Babylonian, because we do have Babylonian things that go back to and Abraham was from Ur the Chaldeans, right? And we do have marriage laws between concubines. So does that help inform our understanding of the family dynamic between Abraham, Sarah, and Hagar, or between Jacob and his wives and their concubines, right? And those different family dynamics. And does that explain to us about the inheritances between, what son gets what? then does that explain why all the sons of, Leah and the other ones hate Joseph? Just what about families type stuff? Materials. What were their homes like? What was their dresses like? How can we tell wealth and affluence, right? Does Joseph have a coat of many colors, or does he have a coat that goes down to his wrist? Because you've always been told it's a coat of many colors, right? Probably, and it could be multicolored, could be, but through archaeology and a better understanding of the time period, it probably means a coat that goes down to his wrist, to his hands. Why would that be important? Why would his brothers hate him for having a coat that goes down to his hands? Don't overthink it. Didn't have to work. When his brothers, when Jacob sends Joseph to go check on his brothers, what are his brothers doing? They're in the fields working. Where's Joseph? He's at home wearing a coat that goes over his hands. He don't have to work. He's a favorite, right? And if it's 90 degrees outside and you're working in the fields and your brother who doesn't have to work because he's the favorite comes out there right on his donkey and you can see him coming in his nice big flowy coat covering his hands, you might want to kill him too, And so, it helps you understand those types of things, right? So materials, their food, their work, their social norms, understanding the hospitality ideas between the ancient customs and why it's so important, and the actions that take place either with Abraham and the angels of the Lord or what takes place in Sodom, those types of things. Athletics and recreation. This is a good illustration. Everyday customs. Okay. So, the Samaritan woman. Okay. So, we don't draw water. You may have a well at your house. If you have a well, I'm pretty sure it's got a motor pump that pumps it to your house or to a spigot or something. Okay. And so, but those wells you had to go to with a bucket and draw the water. And the Bible tells us that she comes at the noonday. Well, if you just read it, you're just kind of like, okay, interesting detail. It was noontime. No, if you understand the culture and the context, women didn't come to the well during the noonday. They came early in the morning and sometimes later in the evenings when it wasn't so hot. They also didn't come alone. They came in groups for their own protection. You don't go by yourself as a woman in the ancient world, right? Or in modern day New York City. That's the last one. Okay, sorry, last one. And so, but you go as a group for protection, but also to socialize, right? To talk. Well, she has no protection and she's a social outcast. So before she even opens up her mouth, before Jesus ever says, yeah, I know you've had 5 husbands and the one you live with isn't like, so before Jesus says that, you're like, why is this woman a social outcast? Why is she there? What is going on? So if you understand the original context, your interest is piqued. Like something's off about this woman. Like she shouldn't be there. Why is she there? Right. And then later in the story, Jesus tells us that it's like, oh, that's why. Right. And so the customs, athletics and recreation. Athletics are popular today. Athletics are probably more popular in the ancient world than they are today. That's hard. That's maybe hard for you to understand, but you have more distractions today than they did in the ancient world. Athletics was extremely popular in the ancient world. In fact, the city of Rome, the city of Constantine, and the city of Nicaea were all almost completely destroyed from riots after athletic competitions in the ancient world. I mean, so it's not just like Philadelphia fans after they win the Super Bowl or something like that. Like it's kind of universal impulse, right? To be so happy you burn stuff down, I guess. I don't know. And so, but, to understand all the analogies that Paul uses when it comes to athleticism, music and art, that reflects the greater culture in which it's produced and it gives insights on what is deemed to be important or inspiring. And so, you can look at cultural anthropology. What are the core tenets of society that undergird how they function? Like honor and shame. If you don't understand honor and shame in the Roman world, if you don't understand patronage when it comes to the Roman world, you're going to have a hard time really understanding what Paul says in some of his writings, especially when he writes to the Thessalonians, right? If you don't understand that as a slave or a free man, you would basically get up every morning and go to your patron's house to see what he wanted. I mean, like, there is no middle class. All of us have been peasants, except for one or two, and I'm not naming names in here, okay? And so we'd all been peasants. So as a man, if you weren't already a slave living at someone's house, doing menial labor for him, if you did so happen to be a free man, every morning you'd have got up, you'd have got dressed, and you'd have went to your patron's house just in case he needed something. And you'd have stood in line, and you waited your turn, and you'd have walked up, and you'd have been like, hey, Brownie, looking good, man. Like, new shirt? You know, need anything? Need any favors in town? Let me go to the marketplace and get some for you? No, okay, just making sure. You know, and he would say, hey, Isaac, how's your family? Brownie, man, they're doing great, dude. So Christmas is coming up. You got anything for the kids? Well, I mean, you know, Emmett wants a couple things, you know, and Gia wants everything. You know how that goes. And he'd be like, here, man, here's a couple of denariuses. You know, buy him something from Uncle Brownie. Right? Oh, thank you, man. Appreciate that. Oh, and Isaac, by the way, before you leave, there's going to be a vote in the city council next week, and I'm actually running for such and such. I can count on you, can I? Dude, you can count on me, brother. Okay, that's the ancient world. Okay, like that's patron-client relationships. Okay, and so that's standard operating procedure, right? And so that helps you to understand. You know, like you look to someone for your sustenance, and Paul says, you don't need a patron. You need Christ. He'll take care of all your needs, all your supplies. Browning tells you to go and murder somebody in the back alley who's a political rival of his. Don't do that. That's wrong. Put your faith and your trust in Christ, right? And so you have to understand something about the honor and shame culture, about client-patron relationships, right? This idea of purity versus pollution, especially in the Old Testament. Religious practices, you know, what is taking place. Now, religious customs controlled every aspect of daily life of the people. Every activity carried some type of religious overtones, especially true in the Old Testament. And it's hard for us because we live in such a secularized society that nothing has religious overtones. So it's really hard for us sometimes to understand and appreciate the context and the biblical time frame because we live in such a secularized society. Whereas they lived in such a hyper-religious and superstitious society. But you have to understand that. And so there are tools you can use to help learn that. History books, I've got a couple here. You can do dictionaries, New Testament, backgrounds of early Christianity or early Christians. But Everett Ferguson is a book that I showed a couple of weeks ago. Background commentary of the Old Testament. They also have a New Testament version. And so different types of text. You can look at different things, Old Testament allusions. And so you can get a lot of information by cross-referencing things that are taking place at the same time period in the Bible, right? So you can cross-reference those things. Hellenistic parallels, right? Because the New Testament is in a Hellenistic world. Number 3, intertestamental period allusions. I really think that understanding something about the intertestamental period is so important. I think if people knew more about the intertestamental period, they would have a much better understanding of the New Testament, especially the Gospels. We did a class on that. If you weren't here for that, it's on YouTube. Highly recommend it. It's a really good class. Rabbinic parallels and then Qumran parallels. Those to me are not really as important because the rabbinic parallels we have, some of those come from hundreds of years after the New Testament is written, after the temple is already destroyed. And so, take rabbinic parallels into consideration, but maybe not as important as some people have made them out to be. And so whether it's archaeological allusions or parallels, be certain the evidence comes from the same time period. And so knowing things about Rome is very important, but it's not important for me to learn about things about David's kingdom. Number 2, ascertain the reliability of the evidence, about how reliable is this. Don't be selective in order to drive an agenda. Consider not only the current situation, but also the historical development behind it. Okay, so I need to know if this is a situation in the first century, this goes back to the intertestamental period, why is it like this? Why are there such divisions between the Jews and the Pharisees, Sadducees, Herodians, Hasmoneans? What's going on? Well, you have to think about the development of what goes there. And remember, the best source of historical data is the Bible itself, right? And if you find a piece of data that doesn't agree with the Bible, then the data is wrong. I'm working from the preconceived notion that the Bible is the final authority, right? And so, all right. And so, how we do this: study the passage thoroughly, be comprehensive and critical in your collection of data, make sure the parallels overlap, don't force the meaning, and the text is the primary, not the background material. The Bible is the primary text. The other stuff just helps our understanding of the primary text, not the other way around, right? And so, background information and study helps us place the audience into the original situation of the text so we can see how the text is speaking to that original audience. And this helps the listener, us, be able to contextualize, principalize the text for their own lives and current situations. And so thank you guys so much. Appreciate y'all being patient with me and staying a little bit over. And let's go ahead and close in a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for this day that you've given to us. We're thankful for this time to come together to worship you in spirit and truth, and also to come together to study a portion of your word and how we can become better students of that word. Dear Heavenly Father, please help us always to have a desire to understand the meaning of Scripture, and then to take that meaning and to faithfully apply it to our lives so that it'll change the way that we think and change the way that we live, and also change the way that we interact with others, that we too can show them that there is a manual for how they can live, and that there is nothing greater in life to direct our steps than your word. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.